All right. It's working.
I didn't do it yet. You guys are like.
Adjusting, sorry guys. Okay. You're missing out if you're not here. Here's our bullpen of preachers for the night. I hope everyone's ready for popcorn preaching, and it's gonna go long.
this gathering tonight. And so let me just kind of give you a quick intro here, and then Ryan's going to come up and kick things off with our songs tonight. So we've got 8 fellas, one after the other, going to come up and preach. We got 8, expanded from 6, so we're shooting about 7-8 minutes, but we want the Lord to lead, but we want each of these fellows to be able to have that time to really just share what God's laid on their heart. So feel free to be involved. Y'all allowed to say something. I know it's up north, not down south anymore, but you know, if you got if any of y'all are from the south or spending time there, hey, feel free to bring some of that up here tonight and just enjoy what God's going to do. Everybody should know the order, so Ryan's going to lead us in 2 songs here, and then as soon as he's done with song 2, we've got Robert Jr. to kick things off and Brandon Braley, and then we're going to go in order after that. If you feel the need, I'm going to jump up here and we'll lead a song or 2 and grab a hymn book and do some singing and some shouting for a minute. But other than that, let's go ahead and open this thing in prayer. Fellas, take your time and get ready, and then we'll get to singing here. Heavenly Father, again, good time to be here in this building. Good time to be here with these folks. God gave us a beautiful day, kept us all safe through the weekend. And He allowed us to be here. Lord, again, this is the time that we set aside for this purpose. And it's good to see friends. It's good to be together as church family and other churches, just being able to fellowship here a little bit. But ultimately, Lord, we'd love to meet with you. And Lord, if you speak to our hearts through the message, through the preachers, God, give them the words to say. Give them what is needed. And Lord, you know each and every mind and heart here. And you know what we need for the day, for the week to come, God, if you give us that time. So I pray that you just give us those things. Lord, lead, convict, encourage, inspire, compel, do what you want to do. We'll praise you. We give you this time. Lord, please, would you bless it. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right, go ahead and stand up tonight, folks. We're going to start with Victory in Jesus. Focus on 8-12.
Precious blood atoning, and I repented of my sin and won the victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. Praise God, He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood. I heard about a mansion He has built for me in glory, and I heard about the streets of gold beyond the crystal sea, about the angels singing and the old redemption story, and some sweet day I'll sing out there the song of victory. Oh, victory in Jesus, my Savior forever. He sought me and bought me with His redeeming blood. He loved me ere I knew Him, and all my love is to Him. He plunged me to victory beneath the cleansing flood.
All right, we're also going to do our victory medley.
Weapon may form, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph.
Yeah, Robert.
Exodus chapter 4. If you got your Bible today, turn to Exodus chapter 4. My dad, he wanted me to get into sports without actually being in sports. So, because, I couldn't enjoy sports because we played on Sundays all the time. And so, they play sports on Sundays, so I couldn't play sports, I play stuff, whatever. But he wanted me to be athletic nonetheless. And so I went out and, we would play church leagues and we would play with family, we'd play with friends on different sports, but I was not very good at sports. I'm still not all that good at sports. And I was making excuse after excuse after excuse why I didn't want to play in these certain sports. And I was like, I'm not good at basketball. I'm short and, I can't shoot the ball. I'm not really good at anything. And I kept making excuses and excuses and excuses. But in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. See, Moses is, we're talking, right now we're talking about Moses in the Bible, and the flaming bush is going on right now, you know the story of Moses. And God's talking to him through this flaming bush, and God's giving him these commands. He's saying, I need you to do this, I need you to say that. And Moses, actually in verse 1 it says, and Moses answered and said, but behold, he said, and Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice. They will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And the Lord said, and so he's using excuses. He's like, they're not going to believe me. They're not going to believe that you're talking to me. And he's already starting with excuses. Then we go over to verse 10. And Moses said unto the Lord, O Lord, I am not eloquent, neither therefore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Again, he's making excuses, and he's trying to say how I can't do it. Other people can do it for me. I can't do it. Me personally, I cannot. I was not made to play basketball. I was not made to talk to people. I was not made to get up on a stage and preach. I was not made to go out and tell people about Jesus. I was not made to go off and do all these different things that you're asking me, Lord. There's someone else that can do it. There's other churches that can do it. I cannot do it. But in verse 11 it says, and the Lord, you ready for this? Oh, it's going to fall. And the Lord said unto him, who hath made man's mouth? Or who made the dumb, or deaf, or the seeing, or the blind? Have not I the Lord? He questions Moses. And he says, you're making all these excuses, but do you know who made your mouth to speak? I did. We keep wanting to make excuses. There's so many different excuses that people said in the Bible. You had Samuel that went to Jesse, David's father, and he was like, hey, I want you to get all your brothers. And Samuel's like, wait, there's someone missing. The king is not here. And they're like, oh, well, it's that guy in the fields. But he's nothing. See, we want to make excuses that young people can't do anything either because, well, they're young. Well, you don't know the attitude they have. Well, you don't know the things that they're doing or the things they're saying. You're making excuses. Do you not know the God that created the child? You go on and on. The rich young man in Matthew 19. God was saying, you need to get rid of everything. If you want to be this perfect person, he says, get rid of everything. And the rich man was so upset because he's like, I don't want to get rid of everything. He's making his excuses in his head. Zechariah. He wanted to make excuses. All these people keep making excuses on why they can't be the best for the Lord. Why they can't go out and they can't sing and they can't speak upon the Lord's name. Why they can't do these ministries in church. Don't make those excuses. That's it. Amen.
Brandon.
We started out with Job 1, and you read that there was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and feared God and eschewed from evil. And then you keep on going, you see that God blessed him. Oh, I'm sorry, God didn't bless, he was blessed. Pretty much, still.
In your hands.
So, Job was loaded. He was rolling in the dough. Job had it all. He had 3,000 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, very great household, and that he was the greatest of all the men of the Middle East. So because of that, and then the devil comes, right? The devil is saying, of course, that you bless Job because you give him all this stuff. So God just makes a bet and says, okay, you can touch everything he has, you just can't touch him. So the devil does. But then he did this. A wind blew on his children's house while they were having a party and killed everybody. While the messenger was telling them that, right when they told him that, another messenger comes and says, the Sabians, they take all that oxen and asses and kill all the servants but me. Right when he said that, another messenger comes up and says, fire, fell from the sky and burned all the sheep and killed everything, and I was the only one to survive. And then the Chaldeans came, and then another messenger came, right when he was saying that, and said, hey, the Chaldeans came and they took 3 bands, they took all your camels, and killed everybody but me. So, in that time, Job lost everything. Absolutely everything. Have you ever been there? Yeah. I mean, well, personally I have. Like, I've had great tragedy, but I've never lost all what Job what Job lost. And then after all this happens, not only does he lose everything, but his wife mocks him. Job 1:9. Okay. I'm sorry, I lost it. But his wife mocks him. Says, curse God and die. And after that, his friends come. They try and cheer him up. So 3 of them. And we're going to get to where I want to stop at real quick. This is his last friend, who is Eliphaz, the Temanite, comes and he comes to Job. And the first thing, what he accuses of is sinning. Like, you lost all this because you sinned. And you see, should have started with my notes. I'm sorry, I can't find it. But he pretty much says, just to add to it, the innocent don't get punished. Right? So Job goes through all that, and I encourage you to read it yourself. I'm just giving you all the basics. And after all that, you turn to Job 6:24. And Job says, teach me, and I will hold my tongue and cause me to understand where I'm erring. Job just lost everything. Like, he has nothing. And at this point, his wife mocks him, and he has boils, because the second part of the bed is God says you can touch him, you just can't kill him. And the sad part is we're not Job. 90% of our problems we cause. And Job wasn't Jesus. Like, Job did sin, but his sin wasn't what caused his catastrophe. Of course, his friends didn't know that because they didn't have the book of Job. So if you're thinking like, hey, I'm not Job, I can't react to that. Well, James also pretty much gives the same instruction. So know this, my beloved brothers, Let every person be quick to hear, and slow to speak, and slow to anger. In 1 Peter, whosoever desire to love and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil, and his lips from speaking deceit. So in our hardest times, just take a breath for a minute, and if somebody's telling you something, there's probably a reason to. That's all I got.
All right, who here knows the story of Joseph? Yeah, I love the story of Joseph. Which Joseph? So, Joseph had a hard life, rose to power, gained all this fame and fortune in the favor of God. Sounds like a good story, right? Okay, I'm about to ruin it for you in 8 minutes. So, Joseph, we're going to walk through his life a little bit. And so, Joseph was born, and his dad was really bad, pick favorites. And so, he said, I like your mom the best. So, he gave him a robe of many colors. He gave him everything. He gave him his inheritance more than all his brothers. And his brothers didn't like that, and I can understand why. And so they devised a plan. It involved a pit. They threw him in a pit. And then they were going to sell him to slavery, and then someone came back to say, don't do it, but it was already done. So his brothers threw him in a pit, sold him to slavery. But then the slave owners were kind of nice. It's weird to say that, but they were kind of nice. They took good care of him. Then he got thrown in prison. So he has this long fall. He's just going down and down and down and down. And then there's two people he meets in prison, and they both have dreams. And these dreams, he interprets the dreams. And he says, one of you is going to die, and the other one's going to become the cupbearer of the Pharaoh. One of those is good news. And so both come to pass. And the person who says that he was going to be the cupbearer of the Pharaoh, he says, remember me. And then the cupbearer, he becomes the cupbearer of the Pharaoh, completely forgets about Joseph. Joseph's just rotting in prison. And so, but then the Pharaoh starts having these weird dreams. And the cupbearer goes, oh, I know someone who can interpret dreams. There's this guy in prison, he's been there for like years. He read my dream, he can read yours. And so Joseph interprets the Pharaoh's dreams. And the Pharaoh just knows it says God in the Bible, but it's a word that is not the word for God. It's not Yahweh. It's Elohim, which means it was a spirit-like creature. So they didn't know it was the Hebrew God, but they knew it was a power of God. It made sense. And so Pharaoh just starts exalting him, bringing him up. Pharaoh says, you can't do anything that I say unless he says you can do it too. He gives him a new coat, a wife, a house, everything he could ever desire. But what does Joseph say about it? Now, we don't get any real talk of Joseph until he meets his brothers again. But he does give us a little clue into his mind. The names of his sons. He's walking around the palace. He has two sons. And the first one, by the way, Joseph's Egyptian name is the hardest thing to say in the world. Zaphanaphanea. It's really long. And so he has his first son. And I can just imagine, there's this guard, right? Joseph's the most valuable man in the kingdom of Egypt. And the guard walks by and he's like, Zaphanaphanea, I heard you had a son. What's his name? And this is out of Genesis 41, verse 51. And Joseph called the name of his firstborn Manasseh. For God said, he hath made me forget all my toil in all my father's house. He's saying, I forgot the trouble that my father caused me. I forgot the trouble that my brothers caused me. I forgot. It doesn't matter. I let it go. He's saying, I would rather forgive them for selling me into slavery, causing me years in prison, than to be angry. And if that's not enough, a couple years later, he has another kid, Zaphanaphanea. I heard you named your kid another Hebrew name. What's that? And the name of his second called him Ephraim. For God hath caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Even though he was exalted to greatness, he knew he was outside of the presence of God. If you go into theology, you've got the promised land, and then you got Egypt. Egypt is the exact opposite. And Joseph said, God, you placed me here. And you still gift me because I'm faithful. I'm faithful outside of the people of your promise. I'm keeping the name of your promise on my kids, even though mine has been changed. Even though the coat my father gave me has been replaced with the coat of the Pharaoh. I will be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And I'm just like, I struggled in work with it a while. I'm still struggling with it. I'm like, too much stress, too much this, too much that. I'm in construction. I can't repeat 95% of the things people on job sites say. I'm like, it would be bleep, hi, bleep. And so I'm like, what's my job there? What's my job? It's to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. Because God has blessed me to be here. But he wants to take me further. And if you keep reading the story of Joseph, he meets with his brothers. And he doesn't quite trust them at first. I think it's understandable. He got thrown in a pit. But, so he doesn't quite trust them. He tests them to see if the other son that was born to the same mother as him was still alive. He was still alive. And then he gets them all in a room. And what does he cry out to them? I'm your brother. He doesn't say, yeah, you guys are dead. Because he had the authority to do that. But he said, God has put me here to preserve life. He says, I don't care what you guys think of me. I don't care if you're terrified of me. God gave me a purpose and used you to get me here, even through trouble. And even through the good things that were still trouble, because I'm separated from you, my family. And he said, I'm here to preserve life. And just I'm trying to encourage you guys that the story of Joseph is just a story of encouragement. That no matter what God puts you in, he wants you to know that he's got a plan. Whether you're falling down the pit or you're rising up to greatness in a place you don't want to be. He will make you fruitful in the land of your affliction and give you a call.
Okay. Talking into a mic with one hand is going to be quite fun. This is not really good. The visual. So on Wednesday nights, I meet as a team. I like to ask them to read them out. I'll usually go through and I'll have them read with me a passage of scripture, nothing crazy long, and then we'll just talk about it after. So I'm going to read through a story, the story of Peter walking on water. I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with that. And I don't know why I chose this. I was Friday night, Ryan was preaching upstairs, and I was like, whoa, what am I going to do? Am I going to have us worship? Am I just going to give my time to someone else? And for some reason, Peter came into my mind. And so I started, reading the Bible and, reading the story about Peter. And it was just like bullet point after bullet point after bullet point. And I came up with this word when I'm reading the Bible. A lot of times, I call it sermonizing. Because what I read automatically comes out in sermon form. Okay, I'm going to say it like this. I'm going to slam the pulpit. Dramatic pause. And then we're good. That's just kind of how my mind works. We're going to get into it. Matthew 14. We're just going to read verses 22 till 34. And then I got a few points on each verse that I will talk about. But it starts off verse 22. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to go into the ship and to go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out in fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand, and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were coming to the ship, the wind ceased. And they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth thou art the Son of God. I'm going to stop right there. When I was reading this, it's kind of funny. Peter is probably one of the most relatable people in the Bible, right? There's just a lot of times when he gets outed, per se. Like, he gets called out. And Dad was, on the way here, I was, talking about Peter and how we can kind of relate to him most, blah, blah, blah. And Dad said, I like to look at it like Peter as people, just as us, as humans, as Christians, what they're going through. He was just a simple man, a normal man, just like us. But it starts off in verse 23. Jesus sends the multitudes away. Verse 24. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the winds was contrary, right? So the disciples in the ship, they're in the middle of the ocean. You got waves, you got a thunderstorm, you got wind, you got whatever you can picture, a crazy storm, right? The disciples are in the midst of it, they're in the center. And what I found interesting is when you talk about Peter and walking on water, one of the things that is not talked about a lot is before Peter walks on water. It says in verse 25, and in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. When I was reading this, I was like, okay, I'm looking at my life like the disciples right now, all right? I'm relating, the wind and the waves, and that's just kind of what we got going on in our lives, right? We are always in the midst of something. We always have some distraction. We always have something to get us down. There's something to be upset about. There's a reason to not do something. There's always things going on in our life. And when I read this verse, it's kind of like all the excuses, as Robert was saying, all the excuses kind of go out the window because Jesus goes through all of that and meets me where I'm at. And I read it and I was like, okay, if the disciples are in the middle of this, before the miracle of Peter walking on water, before anything even happens, Jesus goes through all of that just to get to them. You see, verse 26, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, it is a ghost. I mean, like, if you saw a man walking on the water, chances are you're going to be pretty spooked. Walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit, and they cried out of fear. Sometimes Jesus looks a little scary, right? Jesus looks a little different than we think. Sometimes he shows himself to us in different ways than we would like him to. Sometimes it requires stepping out of faith. Sometimes it requires being uncomfortable. And I want to reference 2 Timothy 1, verse 7. For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And when we face a lot of these troubles, right? We're so quick to get scared. We're so quick to doubt. We're so quick to look at whatever God has given us, whatever the Lord's placed in front of us, whatever situation we're in, and we're quick to be afraid. We're quick to, okay, what does that look like? I'm not used to it. Verse 27, but straightway, but immediately, Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Notice how Jesus doesn't let them sit in their fear for any time. He says immediately he steps in and says, Be of good cheer. It is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. Now, this, when I preach or when I talk about the Bible or Wednesday nights or Fridays or whatever it may be, generally I like to preach or speak on things I've gone through or things that I've experienced, and most of the time, the Lord lays something on my heart that I've just gone through, that I've just learned. And I found that you can't really talk about things that you don't know, right? You can't tell people things about things you don't know, right? But you also don't know what you don't experience. And so I was sitting there, and I read that verse, and I got convicted because a lot of times the Lord gives me something. The Lord puts me in a spot. The Lord shows me Himself in a way that I necessarily didn't want. And I'm like, all right, God, if it's really you, give me something, right? Give me something I know. If it's really you and you really want me to, step out over here, why don't you just tell me so that way I have peace and I feel good about it? If it's really you, give me some comfort, give me something to know that that's what I'm supposed to do. And I feel like as Christians, a lot of times, that's our immediate reaction, right? God has placed you where you are for a reason. That's what we preached about this morning. You are where you are for a reason. You have the gifts you are given for a reason. You have the talents, desires, passions you have for a reason. So when God says, come on, like here I am, don't say, okay, well, you put me here and you give me this and you've shown me yourself a couple hundred times and like I know who you are, but just to be clear, show me something else, right? So we question all the time. Without a doubt, our first reaction is to question God. And I was like, man, why is that my first reaction? Verse 29. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water with Jesus. God says, come. All right, he went. We're showing this God. We go, right? We're doing good. We're walking in our relationship with the Lord. A suggestion. We're walking in our relationship with the Lord. We're doing good. We're reading our Bible. We haven't dipped into sin in a couple of days. And, we're walking. We're doing good. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. Now, it doesn't say, the waves were too big. It doesn't say the wind was too strong. It said he saw the waves. He saw the storm. He saw what was around him. He took his eyes off Jesus, got distracted by what the world, by what we're surrounded by the sin, by whatever our ways are, whatever the wind is, whatever we're going through. He got distracted, took his eyes off Jesus, started to sin. There was no slow, immediately started to sin. And his first reaction was, Lord, save me. Isn't that funny, right? We can go our whole lives, we will question God at some point or another till the day we die, and we expect God when we say, no, Lord, I'm going to try and swim on my own. No, God, I'm going to do my own thing. No, I'm going to just see how long I can go without you. Our first reaction when things go bad, when things go south, is God, man, just checking in. I know I've been selfish. I know I've been doing my own thing. I know I've been in sin. But if you can get me out of this pickle, I promise I'll become 100 times more spiritual. We always do that. And in verse 31, and immediately, Jesus reaches forth, stretched forth his hand, and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? Again, we see the word immediately. God doesn't sit there and say, okay, I'll let you sing a little bit. God didn't look at him and mock him and question him and discourage him and, make him feel like he was doing something wrong. God said, here, I'm going to grab you. And then we're going to figure this out. I'm going to grab you. Where did your faith crumble? Where did you fall down? Where's your faith? Verse 32. And when they were coming to the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were there in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth thou art the Son of God. It's funny that when they pulled Jesus back into their boat, everything went quiet, right? It's funny that when they said, all right, Jesus, it's you. We've gone out, we've walked on water, we started to sink, we grabbed you. It's funny, as soon as Jesus came into the boat, as soon as his presence was there, as soon as he stepped foot, boom, peace, boom, comfort, boom, encouragement. And you see in verse 33, then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth, thou art the Son of God. As soon as you get back into the ship of God, things start to quiet down. God calms the storm. You just got to choose to ask him for help. As Christians, oftentimes we go through our trials, we go through what we're going through, right? And without failure, as soon as we ask God, as soon as we connect that with him, as soon as we get in our boat, as soon as we grab him to face whatever problem we're dealing with, he brings peace. And then not only that, he gives us the ability to worship him. And he says, okay, you were sinking, you were indulging in that thing, you were on your own, you were trying to swim, but guess what? Here I am, all right, it is me. They worship him. And I want to encourage you as you go throughout your week, and whatever things you are dealing with, right? We're all dealing with something. And I would just encourage you this week to kind of, what's the word? Identify some areas that you're likely to struggle with. Identify some people you can encourage. Identify some ways you can give. Identify just whatever you feel the Lord put on your heart. And just ask God how you can go. Just see where he takes you. Thank you.
The last time I was on a stage I think I was 15 or 16, but it wasn't for a church. It was actually for Alcoholics Anonymous, the biggest gathering, I can't remember the name of it, but Dad, you're in the back, you're part of the testimony, you're a big part of it, and we had long hardship, and when I was up on the stage, I was giving my testimony about where I was coming from that point, and now I'm doing it again, so it's interesting. So my dad drank for a very short period of time in my life, and gave it up shortly before 9/11. So it was an interesting kind of way to remember that, because I was young, so I didn't understand this tragedy, but I didn't understand why my dad stopped putting the beer away. But I didn't really see that, so it was like growing up, I didn't really see the drinking, so he had this dry alcoholism, or dry alcohol. It's like you take a cigarette away from someone who smokes, they're going to get angry. And it's just the same thing. And so there's a lot of just unnecessary wrath that I felt. There's a lot of things my mom pulled into that I thought was fine. Oh, she's not just pushing buttons, she's just defending herself. But I painted this picture of my dad being this horrible person, my mom being perfect. And that's not healthy to do with anybody. And so, growing up, I was not sheltered, bubble, or anything, but I put myself in that bubble, because growing up, my parents want to protect you, but I kind of stayed in that little corner, and not like super close to my mom, but enough to where anything she said was okay. So I go to a lot of churches growing up. I started very young, and the first church I remember which was a cult. And so I didn't know it was a cult, I was about 4. And there was a lot of strange rules that I didn't understand. Like, why am I in trouble for not singing in the church choir? Or why am I in trouble for kicking my feet? It was a weird experience, getting in trouble for not memorizing the verse when I struggled with memorization. And so we gone to a different church, new family, church people, different church. This one's Baptist. This one's not Catholic. That one's whatever denomination. We kind of just bounced around those churches. And I wasn't really holding on to a good understanding of who God was. In one church, I had a teacher say, "You don't need to read the Bible to go to heaven." And I'm like, "That's my golden ticket. I can just believe in God and go to heaven." And I kind of used that for a long time. And sometimes I still fall back to that when I'm like, "I don't have to read my Bible tonight. I'm going to heaven." But it's such an empty kind of feeling of, yeah, I believe in this God, but I don't know anything about this God. And so is that believing, or is that just like, I don't think it is. So growing up, I had a lot of hardship with my family. I was always pointing fingers, like, "You're the problem, you're the problem." I'm not the problem. There's nothing wrong with me. You made me this way. And so it kind of carried into my teenage years. I'm 25 right now. But when I was about 15, my first job was blazing bills, and I started to smoke weed. And whatever, it's very whatever drug to some people, and to some people it's like, "I can't believe you're the worst." And so I would do that a lot. I had it from my parents, not very well. I was really bad at hiding it. There was one time I just put it behind the toilet because I forgot about it. The next morning I pull it out and I'm like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I don't know, I'm stupid." But I kept doing that. I was just a fool with it. And so I was kicked out of the house. I was living with my coworker. And I just had free will to do whatever I want and started going on the path I wanted to do. Because I didn't want to be a Christian. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. But that lingering thing of, like, "You still believe in me," kind of thing just stuck with me. Because when I was about 10, there's a TV program on saying, "Have you ever accepted God into your heart?" And I'm like, "No, I haven't." And so I did. I just said the prayer along with the person on the TV, and I had it in my heart, but still carried on without really reading the Bible or having a good understanding. I've always known Jesus died on the cross for our sins. And that, I could never deny that. But before I was kicked out of the house, I grabbed my Bible. And like, I just wanted to smoke weed, but I looked at my brother, he's 5 years older than me, and I just said, "I'm sorry." I grabbed the Bible and left. And so I had an experience where I took acid, and it was very, very evil experience where, you know, I'm in my body, but I'm not in this world kind of experience. You can say, "Well, it's drugs, of course." But when you're seeing people talk in a demonic way, seeing upside down crosses, seeing things that don't make sense, I fell back into this, God that saved me. Like, I'm falling in water, but I put myself out in the deep. And so I finally got out of that. And I'm like, yes, I can put away these drugs, put away these things I want to do. And I'm out there on acid, reading the Bible, God saved me, get me out of this. And not like even like a day, not even hours after I went back to it, I started smoking more weed. I kept going back and forth, and Daniel's actually a big part of my testimony. You know, I'm not hitting those girls because back in the kitchen, it's like, "Who are these two models?" They're too attractive to the restaurant. But then I hear him saying something about the Holy Spirit, and I'm like, I don't hear anyone talk about the Holy Spirit. It's only church. And that made me think, like, why is it only in the church? Why is it never out in public? I've never heard anyone say just Holy Spirit out in a public place. And then you go, like, "Oh." So I went to this church, I went to Abunda. And I walked in, and someone's like, "Can I pray for you?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And they said the exact same things that were on my heart. "You don't think you're a good Christian?" They didn't know I was Christian, not. "You don't feel like you belong here. You've had struggle with thoughts of suicide, you've struggled with this." They're hitting everything that's on my heart and in my mind. I'm like, "Stop, please." And then someone else says, "I pray for you." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, you can't say anything more than do." And so there's this connection where, like, I know God is real, but I didn't believe him. And I didn't want to for the longest time. And so coming to the church in London for a while, I kept going in and out. I was almost chasing two highs. I was chasing high from weed and in the high of the Holy Spirit. I get there, get the best sermon, and oh my gosh, the music's perfect. When we hit that note, the slides are going in sync with the music. Oh my gosh. And then I go back to the drugs. And I go back to some of that world that hurt my heart. And then I just repeat and go back to the church. And think, oh yes, high off this prayer someone just gave me because they said exactly what I'm going through. As I proceed to go back to what I'm going through. And it was just back and forth struggle. So I was constantly doing it to a point where it's like, how many times can I do this? And so I got baptized at Horizons in Middlefield. And that kind of like kicked me off to like, all right, you're starting to get momentum and going back to church. But now that I'm out of that cycle, which I was spiraling down, it's like, right, we're taking out these two things. These girls that hurt your heart, this weed, these friends, all this, put it aside. But now that's gone, I'm in a slightly different cycle. Where it's like, I'm not going back to those old habits. I'm going to find, not good ones. I'm still not reading the Bible. I'm still not proactively trying to help somebody. It was a step, but it was like a half step. Whereas I had these great experiences, and I met these great people, but I let myself just get dropped. I became spiritually apathetic. I don't care. Even though I'm away from this is all I want. I want to be away from these things, not in a place that's comfortable. And that wasn't good because God said, right now you got to pray for this person. And I'm not praying for that person. He said, do it. And I did it. And it was crazy because like I never thought I'd pray for somebody. And like I see all you people like praying for somebody, and it's like, why? Why would you pray for me? Why would you pray for anybody? I didn't have a good understanding about it. Sometimes I fight with my understanding. I fight with churches, I fight with church people, I fight with a cat Peanut. My mom says he's a Christian cat. You don't know. He does know. He lays in the Bible every morning, so he must know. But, I had to kind of grow up. I was stuck in this weird mental cycle. They say with alcoholics, the age you start drinking is the mental age you get stuck at. And I think it kind of worked with me smoking because I'm kind of stuck in this like high schooler brain, like how the world works. The world doesn't work how high school lets you think it does. And so I've been trying to unlearn everything the church has taught me because I've been to so many where it's like, what do I really know? What if I actually sat down, backed away, heard a message, digested it, went to the scriptures, and got it for myself? Not much. Not much at all. I've just been like, yes, to everyone who's ever taught me anything. It's like, that's not my God, that's a person talking. I let people be my ring. I let people tell me how to feel, think, and oh man, the self-hate and loathing, you're the worst person. Someone says you stink a little, and I hate you. You can't say that about me. It's like, but I'm the worst bully to myself with someone who says something that kind of mean, and I'm like, you can't say that about me. It's like, where's this coming from? I always say I hate myself, so yeah, you're right. No, I struggled with that for so long. It was like I wasn't a person. I was just a shell. And so still, even with my wealth now, kind of catch up to speed in this weird, pressing, refining time of trying to find my walk. Recently, the past month, my mom has been having health issues where it was scary. Me and my dad had to pretty much beat the doctor and figure it out. Just a quick little understanding what this is. She had laryngospasms in her neck, which her neck would close and breathing for about a minute, and it's from acid reflux. We didn't know this. Me, my dad, and mom all had to figure this out together, but essentially it was for a minute and you can't breathe during that. That's scary to hear in the morning when you're sleeping. It's scary to hear at any point of the day, and we could not figure it out. So I'm pressing into God so much at this point where I haven't been pressing in at all for anything. And now it's like, God, something to us, please. And I finally find something. I find a symptom. My mom finds the cause. And we take her to the doctor in the hospital. The first thing they told her, go home, take a hot bath. Wrote her off. And that, the fear is, because it's my mom and her health, and they're writing her off and saying, your trauma isn't bad enough right now. You can't breathe? Not bad enough. So we just kept praying. But I was like recently lying on the floor with a blanket over me, like, pray. Do it, pray. Me, come on, do it, pray. And I can't pray. I'm just there soaking in this sadness because I lost faith, lost hope. And then I'm like, oh, I can't do that. Not now. I can't lose that now. And so I pressed in more. And now when she turned a corner, I prayed over her, and she's feeling better, just a struggle with a cough that hurts her back. So I prayed over her back, and still being lazy and not trying to just dig out everything that is available to me from the Bible that God says is our right to have. And so just keep pressing and don't get lazy. And test your leaders. I don't care who they are. Test them. You're sure about that. My Bible doesn't have Matthew 21 for some reason. I didn't know that. Which, look it up. Make sure your Bible has 17:21. It's kind of important.
So I was a church attendee since I was in the womb. I went to every church event, from vacation Bible school every Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night Awana, upwards basketball, you name it. I was there. I remember one week when I was growing up, I was there all the time. Okay, so I had every chance, every possibility to hear how to get to heaven. I knew the Romans Road, John 3:16, and I remember singing, Jesus Loves Me. And in 2013, I entered the scariest time I ever had in my life, and that was high school. It was my first time in a public school, and little to say, I was sheltered. So my freshman year, I carried my Bible with me as like a security blanket. My sophomore year, I decided I was going to be bold, and I put it on top of my books that I took to all my classes. And by my junior year, I was hesitant, and I didn't want it anymore, so I put it on my shelf to collect dust. Talking about John the Baptist, he was born to be the person before the Messiah came, and to get people ready. In Matthew 3, we see that he was set apart. He told the people to repent and to change one's mind about God. If we read in verse 8, he calls the Pharisees and the Sadducees a rod of vipers. So we see how bold he really was in his faith. He was also very humble in the moment when he was able to baptize Jesus. From these experiences, John had an amazing chance to know Jesus and to be used by God for great things in his life. And if you don't know his family, little to say, let's just say they grew up in their church setting, and he knew all of the church answers in his Bible classes. And not long after all these wonderful things, after baptizing Jesus, he ends up in prison. So, looking at Matthew 11, starting in verse 2. Now, when John had heard in prison the works of Christ, he sent 2 of his disciples, and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? Jesus answered him and said unto them, Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. The lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. Jump down to verse 10. For this is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before the face, which shall prepare thy way before thee. Verily I say unto you, among them that are born of women, there hath not risen a greater than John the Baptist. Notwithstanding, he that is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. Jesus answered him and said, There has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist. And in the hard times in our life, we find ourselves doubting what God has for us. And if we're really lucky, we are able to push through in our lives and just see the other side of that doubt and the anxiety that builds within us. When I went through that season of doubt in high school, and I put my Bible on the shelf to collect dust, I felt alone in my doubts. I felt like I couldn't go to anybody from it, and I had nowhere to turn. But then when you look at John, he was so scared, sitting in his prison cell, being the person who was literally in the Bible to make the way for the Messiah. And he's going, Are you that guy? Because I'm really scared right now in this prison cell. And I don't know if you're the one in this moment. And how did Jesus respond to him? He responded in love. And his response was, so weird. The blind can see, the lame can walk, the deaf can hear, and the dead are raised. Through Jesus Christ, who will strengthen us through our doubts and anxieties. He's not mad, but he wants you to come to him. He wants to be with you in this problem, whatever the problem is that you have, and be with you in it. Thank you. Yeah.
Hey, Roy. I'm a little shaky. I don't know if it's because of the 5 shots of espresso I just had. I'm nervous, but I really want to talk about how Jesus is a servant and how he models the life to live. And there's a place in the gospel where it's the only place Jesus actually describes his own heart. And he uses the words humble and lowly, or meek and lowly. That's how the King of Kings describes himself to his people. And so, we all know John 3:16, that for God so loved the world that he sent his only son. I think sometimes we hear that, and it's like, oh, well, the Father sent the Son. Maybe, poor Jesus, like someone just hearing that out of, for the first time, I think, well, what did the Son have to say about it? But Jesus was just as willing to go as the Father was to send him. There is no separation in their plan and what they had, and what they wanted to do. So just as the Father loved the world to send Jesus, Jesus loved the world to receive that torture, that punishment, everything that we deserve. So there's no greater love than, oh, the Father loved us a little bit more, the Son loved us. They are one. They have the same love for us. And Jesus coming as a servant, this is one thing that kind of blows my mind. That just like Peter just said, how John the Baptist, Jesus said, he's the greatest born of a woman, but the least in the kingdom is greater than him. And so that should stop us for a second. Wait, what the heck does that mean? The way that Jesus talks about being a servant and taking the lowly position, the one that maybe no one sees, the serving when no one can see it, the forgiving someone that completely doesn't deserve it. The way that Jesus talks about that is mind-blowing. Because we have an issue if someone gossips about us or says something rude to us, and all of a sudden, it's easy to love when people are nice to you. It's not hard for me to love all these people here. It's like, okay, we say hi to each other, we love each other, there's no conflict. But as soon as the conflict comes in, I wrote this down, conflict and oppression are the great revealers of what's genuine. Jesus says, if you love those that love you, what benefit is that? Even the wicked do that. That have friends, even the people who are evil. It's not hard for them to be friends and love the people that are friends to them. But as soon as somebody spits in your face or, says something about you or your family, immediately that whole love thing kind of takes a back seat sometimes in our life. But think about the Son of God, who has every reason to be prideful, I guess you could say. He has no issues, God's not prideful, but if there's anyone that has a reason to be like, have his chest puffed out, like I'm the best, it's him. And he describes himself as humble and lowly, and washes the feet of his betrayer while he's being crucified. Unrecognizable, the very people that are doing it, his Father, forgive them, they just don't know what they're doing. That love, see, there's a shallow love that loves people that love you. But as soon as your enemy comes along and is calling you out or is trying to destroy your life, I think that we sometimes forget that these people were killing Jesus. And then we have people just maybe say something to us rude or we don't like the way that they acted, and then all of a sudden we put this wall, But if the Son of God embraced people that didn't deserve it, how much more should we? He had every reason to not, because he was perfect. And so there's this way to grow that when you come in contact with conflict, we like to, sometimes it's just our immediate reaction is to react to that conflict in a way that's like, I can't believe this, or why am I going through this? Just like Job was talking about Job. But the thing is, when you see that conflict, it talks about James 1. When there's trials and testing, many kind count it as joy. Because going through that will produce perseverance and patience. And those things are real. Because if I can love someone that hates my guts, it's going to stop people in their tracks and be like, wait a second. There's going to be questions. Like, how do you love that person that just cussed you out? How do you love that person that hates you for no reason? And it's like, it will stop people in their tracks and cause them to wonder. And so, we have a perfect example of that in Jesus, in the way that he did everything he did. And when you do that and embrace those things, and you get in line with God's heart, because if Robert, say, walked up to me, and he just started cussing me out, which would never happen. But even my best friend, think about Judas, walked with Jesus for 3 years. If one of my best friends came up to me and sold me out to be killed and murdered, could I look at him and be like, hey man, I love you. I'm about to die, and you were a part of that, but I love you. And so many people just don't know what they're doing. So many people that even talk bad about you or do things to you, they're hurting themselves. And so that saying that hurt people hurt people? Man, if you can look at them through the eyes of Jesus and say, they just don't know yet, and pray for them. When you pray for somebody that takes you off, that makes you angry or whatever, what you're doing is you're tuning a guitar string to the right note. And when you start praying for somebody, it gets your heart in line with the Father's heart. That says that Jesus is forgive them, they just don't know what they're doing. So when you get in line with that and start to pray for people in that way, man, you'll be able to love some people that the world would say are just unlovable. And it's crazy. The last little thing. Has anyone here ever had road rage? Yeah? Well, I was normally pretty patient. And then all of a sudden I caught myself saying something to somebody in a different car that couldn't hear what I was saying. So basically, the only people that knew were me and Jesus. And I heard so tenderly the Holy Spirit say to me, hey, that's not who you are. And he told me every time someone's bothering you or annoying you, start praying for them. And it is undeniable crazy. You'll be looking at that person in the car and be like, oh, God died for them. He poured out his blood because he loves them. And I'm getting ticked off because they didn't turn their blinker on. Jesus died for me and for people that actually killed him. Evil people that killed him. And I can't let go of something small like that. There's power in letting go of an offense. There's verses about it. I don't have them on here right now, but it talks about it being a glory to overlook an offense. Because that's the heart of God. So, when you come into conflict like that, whether it's a person or just a trial, embrace it. Because God is going to deepen that love that maybe was shallow, and look at those things and say, okay, this is the one that actually made me look more like Jesus. Amen?
Amen.
It's so much easier to do this in front of teenagers on Friday nights. Let me just pray. Father, I thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. I thank you for you. And as they talk to me, the theme that you put on our hearts is broken people turning to you. And you lifting us up. Thank you for that. With the words I say, we will pray. Okay, so when they said we had 10 minutes, I had this really cool video that I wanted to play. It was 8 minutes and 29 seconds. Oh, that'll fit. I'll finish it off. No problem. But I also have this other sermon in my iPad that I preached a while ago on a Friday night. And as they were preaching tonight, and that theme just kept repetitive. I was like, no, you know what? Maybe it's not the video tonight. Maybe it's this. So if you go to Romans chapter 5, chapter 8, there's a lot of different names in the Bible for God. Jehovah, Rapha, Nisi, Elohim, El Shaddai, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Prince of Peace. In the last several years, though, I've come to know this one a little closer. Some of you might not know, my wife and I have been trying to have children. And we've lost 2 kids in less than a year over the last 2 years. And the name I want to talk about tonight is Alpha and Omega. And the meaning of this is the beginning and the end. And when you think about the beginning of life, what a miracle that is. Like, just the thought of how that works is just an incredible, miraculous thought. And then if you go all the way to the end of a life, it just passes from one to another, and it's just this mind-boggling concept. And God is both the beginning and the end. He calls himself the Alpha and Omega. And that's all well and good when you have a newborn baby or you need him at the death and loss of a loved one. But the coolest part about the beginning and the end is the only way to be both the beginning and the end is to also be everything in between. In Romans chapter 8, verse 28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose." I just want to share a couple of thoughts tonight. First, I want to ask a question. How many of you have ever had something happen in your life that caused you to question the goodness of God? Had it. It's a very common thing, actually. If you just go poll random people, they don't even have to be church individuals. You just say, hey, have you ever questioned, is God even good?
that question is resounding throughout history. And I said, God, well, how is it that you can promise that things will work together for good? And yet I have these experiences and this pain and this hurt that make me question your goodness. Because you also promised that you're Alpha and Omega, and the beginning and the end, and I'm trying to wrap my mind around this concept of, well, he's also everything in between. We have all felt like God's goodness is conditional based on how we are living. In the story of Job, he comes to this conclusion based on the friends talking to him about, well, it must have been something I did. In every relationship you'll ever have in life, there's conditional love involved, because we're conditional human beings. And we don't understand the concept of unconditional love because we just don't experience it. But God has shown us unconditional love, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. It was not anything I had done. It was not anything I deserved. In fact, it was the opposite of what I deserved. But it was so good that he gave. We have only ever experienced conditional love. But God is Alpha and Omega. And everything in my life fits within God's reach. Nothing outside of my life reaches beyond the beginning or the end of what God is. Because there is no beginning or end to what God is. And so nothing that I can do, nothing that I can experience, nothing I can go through is outside of the reach of the Alpha and Omega. His love touches every single moment of my life. Every moment. When you have a family member that overdoses, when you have a friend die in a tragic car wreck, when you have family that just shuns you and kicks you out of their life, when you lose somebody so close to you, the Alpha and Omega was in that moment. Because the beginning and the end covers everything in between. From the very beginning of your life until the very end, God has loved you. And there's nothing you or I could ever do to change that love. A powerful thought. To know that the Almighty God, the one who has created everything, the one who is in control of everything, the one so far his thoughts are higher than mine, his ways are higher than mine. I can't even comprehend a lot of the attributes of God because my mind is so finite. And no matter what I go through, no matter what I experience, no matter what it is that fits between Alpha and Omega. When God promised to work all things together for my good, unfortunately that didn't mean that it would always feel good. And I think that's the concept that we go into the Christian life with, is that, all things work together for those good, to them that love God. Well, God, I told you I loved you, so why isn't this good? God, I'm going to church on a regular basis, I'm Daniel, I'm one of the most gifted guitarists there is. Why is it that these people are not using their blinker?
Preach.
But it's not that everything would be good. If you read the verse again, it says, all things work together for good. Let me switch over to the Bible. I don't know notes. If you keep reading in that chapter, verse 31 says, what shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Verse 35 says, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril or sword? It all fits between Alpha and because Jehovah Nissi, my banner, that's great. Jehovah Rapha, my healer, that's amazing. Jehovah El Shaddai, all these different names that cover different areas of my life, but Alpha and Omega covered everything. The joys, the mountaintops, the lows, the valleys. It's all covered. The next time we experience something that's not good, doesn't feel good, doesn't look good, just remind yourself that God's unconditional love blankets your life from beginning to end. There is nothing you can do to ever change it. Father, we thank you. Because honestly, that's all we can do. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your care. We thank you for everything in between. And on the days we regret our beginning, and on the days we look for an end, you've covered everything in between. And we thank you for it. Father, bless the lives of those who prepared tonight, and those who have given to this church, those who have shared. I ask that you will allow your Spirit to just continue to work in our lives. That we will allow him free reign and access. And that even when things don't look good, we know that they work for good. Even when things look hard and things don't look fair, we've got a God who's working for our good. And on our last day, even if it takes till our last day, when we stand before you, Lord, let's sing today. Dave, can you play for us? Praise you, my singing. Can we get this one kicked up? This is 1. Stand to sing with us. Tonight, as we look back on our life, we think about everything that we face. We sing this song that reminds us of what Jesus did to show that unconditional love. Because there was no greater gift, no greater sacrifice than the cross. And it's through the cross and his blood that we feel his love, that we are connected to him forever. That we have the ability to look back as Job did. That we have the ability to reach down into what God has given us and talented, the things that he gifts us with. It's through his gift and his blood that we have this opportunity to sing through this.
Praise the name
appreciate it. Everybody that preached, Robert, Brandon, Timmy, John, Austin, Peter, Daniel, Ryan, thank you. Appreciate that. Thanks for being here tonight. We're going to go ahead and say a word of prayer. We're going to dismiss. Normally we take an offering, but fellas in the back, if somebody who goes to our church, if you don't worry about it, it's not for you, that's for our church. On the back of the land, if you got your offering tonight, go ahead and leave it with the fellas in the offering plate. Everybody else, let's join in our heads and we'll dismiss. Lord, thank you for tonight. God, thanks for being with us. Thanks for touching our hearts. Thank you for me. I can't speak for everyone, but God, thank you. Thanks for each of these men that stood up, shared their heart. God, the heart that you spoke to, and they shared that with us, Lord. We praise you for that. God, we praise your name for your beginning to end. Lord, our lives sometimes, when we look at it and we hear that, things can seem so petty, the things that are so big to us, and so frustrating and so discouraging. And yet, God, when we see you for who you are, and when we step back and we look and put you in your place, ours looks so small. And God, thanks for that reminder tonight. Thanks for that encouragement. I pray that you help us to, as we go our way, God, you give us the day and the week to live. We'll praise you for it, but God, opportunities are coming. Doors are open, and I pray, God, that the routine of everyday living wouldn't cause us to miss that. And God, those little frustrations and those things that build up, God, I pray, please don't let us miss that chance to show love to someone that hates us. Don't let us miss that chance to be your witness. Don't let us miss that chance to walk through that door, to seize that opportunity, God, because we're just so focused on what ultimately is so small. We love you. Thank you for this time. I pray that you keep everyone safe as we go.